Hello and welcome to Sask Wildlife's new Youth Conservation Leadership Speaker Series. My name is Chelsea Walters, and I'm here today with our guest professional, Adam Matichuk, to talk about the ins and outs of being an aquatic habitat specialist. Now, Adam, you and I used to work together here at Sask Wildlife. So I had the pleasure of driving into work with you every day for a year, and I know quite a bit about you. But for our viewers who might not know you so well, can you share a couple details about your life and a little bit about what you do for the Water Security Agency?
Sure. Well, firstly, I'd like to say that the pleasure was all mine that we got to work together for too short a time, but it was great time. So yeah, since that time, I've moved on and joined the Water Security Agency as an Aquatic Habitat Protection Specialist, and I work out of the office in Regina.
Cool. So, can you tell me a little bit about, I guess, the day to day of your job versus sort of the cyclical nature of your job, if you have a field season or a busy season or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a little bit of background as to what I do. So I guess to start with, in Saskatchewan, there are a number of different laws that protect the environment. And some of those laws require a person to get a permit or an approval from government before doing certain activities. And one of those permits, for instance, is if somebody plans to do some work around water, they require an aquatic habitat protection permit. So my job involves reviewing those applications. People have to apply for those permits. They send in a proposal describing their work, and we review those applications. And so the applications could be for things like building bridges, replacing road culverts, fixing dams, altering or stabilizing a shoreline, say at a cottage, or building or repairing boat launches, things like that. Basically, any type of work that's done around water. So
Is
once
Adam is
we,
the same for something like stocking as well? Like if they want to
uh,
stock fish?
no, that's a little bit different. So these are projects that actually alter what we call the bed, bank, or boundary of the water course. So that's the bottom of say the lake or the river, the bank of the lake or the river that holds the water in place, and the boundary is the riparian area. So it's the transition zone between the aquatic and the terrestrial habitats. So basically the water habitats and the upland habitats. And so our program focuses on protecting those areas because they are very sensitive. Um, yeah, so once we receive these applications and review them, then usually I write a permit with some conditions that allows the person to do certain activities or doesn't allow them to do other activities. And so basically, those conditions are meant to protect the habitat from the activities that go on around the water. And it also is meant to protect the fish and wildlife that live in those habitats and the water quality of that water as well. So sometimes people come to us with a proposal, and some of the activities we look at it and say, okay, that's not okay. That's going to be harmful to the habitat or to the water quality. So is there a way to do this better? And we'll often work with them to say, okay, no, we don't like that part of the project. Try it this way instead, and let's see if we can do this a little bit differently. And usually we can find a way to make that work less harmful. And sometimes that's not at all possible. Some work is just too harmful. There's no way to get around it. And in those rare instances, we'll actually decline to issue a permit. So we won't give them the permission essentially to do that work. So it's there's a lot of effort that goes into each one of these applications. People think, well, you just get it and you rubber stamp it and away you go and have a nice day. But we actually spend time to review every single one of them on a case-by-case basis around the province. And so we have a team of 7 people. 5 of us are aquatic habitat protection specialists, and we all work in our own regions generally in the province. But we have a team of 7 people, and we process over 1,000 applications every year. So it's a very, very busy job. Another important part of my job involves compliance, permit compliance. So it's fine to write a permit and send out this paper, but if nobody follows it, then what's the point, right? So we have to ensure compliance with this to make sure that the work is being done properly on the landscape and actually avoiding those harmful activities. So there's a couple, sort of the main way that we do this is we work very closely with the conservation officers with the Ministry of Environment, and they're specially trained in enforcement of environmental laws in Saskatchewan. So we work quite closely with them, sometimes together, sometimes separately. We'll go out and actually do a site inspection where work is occurring or has occurred, and we'll look at it and determine if they've done the work or they're doing the work according to the permit conditions. If they're not, or if there are some serious environmental concerns, we will then try and work with the people to fix them. Sometimes that involves an enforcement response. So there's a number of different things that we can do when we move into sort of an enforcement response, but that could be something like writing a letter to them and saying, okay, here's what you need to do to fix this problem. And generally they will go and do the work and fix it up, and then everybody's happy in the end, and the potential impacts to the environment have been prevented or fixed, I guess, if they've already happened.
If someone didn't apply and didn't do a permit to begin with, but they were found to be doing some work that was not beneficial, would you still work with them to make those changes, or how does that work?
Yeah, so and that often does happen where people don't know that they require a permit, or at least tell us they don't know that they require a permit. But in some of those, yeah, exactly. In some of those instances, we'll look at the activity, what's going on, and if it's something we would have allowed had they come to us and applied for a permit, it's likely something that we will still allow, but we will work with them to say, okay, here's how you need to finish your project, or here's what you need to do to fix up your site so it's not an environmental problem. So we'll take that approach. If it's something we wouldn't have allowed, then sometimes we'll say, no, you cannot do this. You must fix it up, and we'll take whatever actions we need to do to restore that site, working with that person. So
restore it, you'd go in and put it back to kind of the way it was before, or?
Yeah, generally it depends on what has happened there, but often it'll be restored back to the way that it was originally, or at least in some way that it's stable and won't be an ongoing problem. So there are a number of ways we can do that. Sometimes we will write a letter and just outline those things that they need to do, and then once they do it, everybody's happy and we move on. Sometimes we'll issue an order, either an environmental protection order or an immediate environmental protection order, which basically directs them exactly what they need to do, how they need to do it, and when they need to do it by.
Serious letter.
It is a very serious letter, yeah, and it needs to be followed. So that's another option. In some cases too, we work with the conservation officers who I view them as sort of the enforcement specialist, whereas I am more of a technical specialist. And we work together. It's a pretty great partnership, but sometimes we'll determine that the best course of action, or the best way to, in a sense, teach a lesson, right, or make our point heard, is to issue a fine or a ticket to somebody, so that they understand that there are repercussions to their actions. So that's another option. Occasionally, on very serious files, they'll actually go to court, and a judge will determine if that person is guilty of breaking the environmental laws, and what they either need to do to fix it, or what kind of fine or charges what kind of fine would come out of those charges. So those typically get into the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars when somebody ends up in court if they're found guilty. But we don't have a lot of those. There's the odd one that goes. So far, I haven't had the opportunity, I guess, to go to court for one of our files yet. But I'm sure the day will come. Yeah. So, and I guess generally on a day-to-day basis, I spend most of my time reviewing the applications, writing letters, writing permits, emails, and answering questions over the phone from people. So there's quite a variety of things that I have to do, but it's very much office-based type work for the most part. Once in a while, when we need to go out and do inspections, we certainly get in a vehicle and go have a look, and those are often pretty nice days. Nice to get out of the office and see some things. When we're not as busy, I spend some of my time working on program development. We're always trying to make our program better for ourselves, so it's easier for us and more efficient, but also, and maybe more importantly, for the public, the people who have to apply for permits or want information as to what they can do on their shoreline and can't do. We try to make that better for them all the time, and it's definitely an ongoing process, but we make a little bit of progress every year.
So it sounds like there's a kind of a writing and, I don't know, community component to it. But what was your schooling geared towards, and what kind of skills would you suggest that young people sort of start building now if they wanted to move into a career something similar to yours?
Yeah. So I started, I guess if you want the real truth, I started out going to university. My plan was to become an optometrist, to be an eye doctor, and it didn't happen. Once I was several years into university, determined that maybe I wasn't cut out for that, and also it was very difficult to get into. And so I decided just to finish my biology degree. So I've got a degree in biology, major in biology, and a minor in biochemistry. And even at that point, I still thought that I might go into some sort of healthcare, human health field. But I ended up getting hired by Fisheries and Oceans Canada in Regina, and started doing some fish habitat work there. And it was just a temporary job for 8 months. And then right after that, I ended up being hired by the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation, where I worked as a fish biologist for over 10 years. And that was a great job. Gave me a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge about how to deal with fish, fish population management, but also my job there was related to fish enhancement work. So I learned a lot about fish habitat, and I think that was really the most beneficial thing. It helped me understand how how lakes and rivers work, how fish survive in them, how the importance of habitat, and what the impacts are on fisheries if habitats are lost or degraded. So that was a big thing. I think as far in terms of schooling, I definitely learned a lot in university that helped me with this job. But most of what I learned that helps me on a day-to-day basis is stuff that I learned after university in my jobs. You just simply learn that kind of stuff over years of doing things. So that's my background. We have a number of people here in our team that have come from a fisheries background. We're fish biologists. In fact, our supervisor has a master's degree in marine biology, and so she comes from that aspect of things. We have one person who comes from a lands management background. We've got another person from more of a construction, site management, environmental management of construction sites, that kind of background. And it's great because we all have something we specialize in, and we can rely on each other for that knowledge and experience, because this job is much more than what you might know about fisheries or certain aspects. So it's definitely beneficial, and it highlights the importance of working together as a team.
Yeah, it sounds like it's pretty diverse there. Like you have a bunch of different areas of expertise coming together. So it's interesting that you can take several different paths to get to the same sort of place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we talked a little bit about schooling. Is there any, and sort of like how you picked up some of your expertise through work? Is there any sort of careers that people could get in a lower level, or some volunteer sort of stuff that you would recommend if someone were trying to build a resume for something like what you're working in?
Yeah, it's a little tricky because, we don't have a lot of volunteer work to do this type of job. It's just simply not an option. Um, but there are certain types of work that I think students or young people could do to work themselves toward this type of career if that's something they're interested in. And it could be something like volunteering for a conservation organization, getting to understand wildlife and fisheries ecology a little bit better, working in parks, things like that certainly help you gain that base knowledge that you might need and could build on. Certainly for say university students that are looking for summer type work, summer student jobs, they could look at something related to fisheries or in wildlife, or Water Security Agency has a number of summer student jobs where people work with fish or birds or things like that. So there are definitely opportunities there. I think that help to help build that knowledge base and experience that would be beneficial for this job, and not only this job, for a lot of jobs in the conservation or environmental fields.
Yeah, cool. I kind of tend to look at it the same way. Like, as long as people seem like they've experimented in a couple different areas, anything kind of helps, as long as you can tell that it was done with that sort of end goal in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm just going to wrap it up by asking if there's any sort of really good advice that either you received or that you'd like to give young people who are thinking about pursuing a career in conservation.
Yeah, I think some of the things that I've learned over the years of doing this through the different jobs and going to university, and I guess in my experience, the path you set out on doesn't mean that's where you're going to end up, and that's okay. That it's not a failure in any way. You can learn so much along the way that'll help you in any job, and I think some of the most important skills that I have, or things that are most important to my job here, are things that are not necessarily things that I learned in university or in high school as much as life skills. But there are certain things. Writing and communication skills are a big part of my job, and they make it so much easier when you can do that effectively. And I'm not a great writer. I'm not necessarily a great communicator, but I'm getting better at it all the time, and it makes things much better. The other thing I think that I've learned, it's really important in this job, but I've learned it all the way along, and I think it's important in every job, is that you need to work well with people, whether that's your colleagues in your office or your workplace, or whether it's the public or members with the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation or something like that. You need to be able to work well with those people. And sometimes working with people can be difficult, especially when you're a regulator like me that has a job of telling people that you cannot do that. That's not okay. And people don't often like to hear that. So it's about learning how to deal with those people, and really the fundamental, the basis to all of this stuff comes down to respect and empathy, and knowing that everybody has a history, everybody has a story, and you have to try and put yourself in their shoes to understand it. And I think when you can learn how to do that, that helps you to be more effective in this type of job, but any job really. So those are my words of advice, I guess, and that's not something I would have really understood when I was in high school or university, but it's something I've come to learn over time, and I think that it'll serve anybody very well.